It all started when my 9-year-old nephew was riding his bike around the neighborhood, just like any normal kid. He's the kind of kid who lives with a scraped knee, a superhero t-shirt, and a backpack that looks like it's been through 3 wars. A little angel with a sharp tongue and a crooked smile that melts even the hearts of frowny people. But not hers. Oh no. The woman in question, who had just taken over as president of our street's HOA, thought she was the Beyoncé of urban maintenance. And look, she took the job seriously. Very seriously. With an imaginary megaphone in her hand and the posture of someone who thinks she's going to win an Oscar for keeping the grass cut 5 centimeters off the ground. She was always doing rounds of the neighborhood. Every week there was a new circular. Don't park your car with the tire bent. Don't hang towels visible from the street. Don't use the hose on Tuesdays. It seemed easier to follow the penal code than the rules of that HOA. And it was in the middle of this scenario that the kid, distracted, and probably trying to fly with his ET-style bicycle, leaned his bike wheel against the sacred sidewalk of her house. My God in heaven! The woman appeared out of nowhere, from the depths of hell, like a Pokemon of the anger and arrogance type, with her gaze fixed, finger cocked, and a voice that made even the birds turn around. She screamed. She screamed as if he had broken the Holy Grail with a baseball bat. This sidewalk is private. This isn't a park. Can't you read, kid? All said with that tone that mixes anger with pleasure. Because some people enjoy a fight like dessert. She seemed to be feeding off it. My nephew, of course, was paralyzed. Can you imagine a child being publicly shamed by a deranged adult in the middle of the neighborhood? And it wasn't just the scandal. The woman threatened to call the police. Yes, on the sidewalk, as if his bike had exploded a bomb on the concrete. But what she didn't know was that she was literally seconds away from discovering who the real sheriff of the situation was. I was inside the house, sipping a bitter coffee and looking at the security camera. Yes, because a neighborhood with an HOA is usually synonymous with a neighborhood in trouble. When I heard the screams and saw that grotesque scene on camera, a grown woman yelling at a child because she had the audacity to step on the wrong cement, I almost choked, but not from fright, from laughter, because I knew this soap opera was going to get an audience. At that moment, I stood up with the calm that only a uniform gives you, put on my hat, adjusted my belt, and walked towards the sidewalk like someone going to collect a prize. Because the show had only just begun. The woman was still in explosion mode, shouting louder than a teacher on a school trip. My nephew had got off his bike and was looking like he didn't know whether to cry or swear. I got close, slowly, without saying anything, just watching. And when she finally turned to me, looking like she was waiting for support, everything changed. She didn't know who I was, but she would. And there, my friends, the real show begins. The first thing I noticed when I got closer was the strong smell of ego mixed with cheap perfume. That woman had the look of someone who imagined herself receiving a Medal of Honor for protecting the integrity of the sidewalk. She turned to me all self-assured, with her voice still in a squeaky mode, and let out a, "Sir, you need to talk to that child. He's destroying other people's property. This is unacceptable." I just crossed my arms and looked at her with the same look I get when a drunk tries to argue with me during a traffic stop. That mixture of, "It's going to get worse for you," and "Keep going. I'm loving it." She talked, gestured, and I stood there quietly, just listening. The more she talked, the more she got involved. She even went so far as to say that she had already made notes about other infractions committed by him. According to her, my nephew had walked too fast on the sidewalk, walked too close to her grass, and looked strangely at the garden. Yes, people. The woman was literally cataloging children's looks. She was creating a children's dossier. She didn't notice, but several neighbors were already at the windows, some with cell phones in hand, because every neighborhood has those people who love a free reality show. And this bullshit was like a season finale. The only reason people didn't grab popcorn was because it would have seemed disrespectful, but they were all there, like a silent courtroom audience waiting for the judge to speak. It was then that she unleashed the pearl. "If you don't know, I'm the president of the HOA, and I have authority over behavior in this neighborhood." And it was at that very second that I saw my nephew look at me with that twinkle in his eye that only a child recognizes when he knows that the adult is going to turn the tables. I took 2 steps forward, adjusted the badge I carry on my belt, the one she probably thought was just an ornament, and said as calmly as I could, "And I'm the county sheriff. Do you want to talk about authority?" Her expression froze. Literally, her jaw dropped as if she'd taken an invisible punch. The woman paled instantly. It was as if someone had pulled the plug on her arrogance. All that energy she'd been carrying evaporated faster than beer on hot asphalt. She stuttered, tried to laugh, made a gesture with her hand that looked like, "That's not what I meant." But it was too late. I told her as dryly as possible that she was bullying a child, and that shouting at a minor in public for ridiculous reasons could be seen as child bullying. And if she wanted to, she could continue, because the cameras in my house caught everything. And look, just the mention of a camera made her start to sweat. I tried to keep my composure because, deep down, what I really wanted to do was laugh. To laugh at the situation, to laugh at her face, to laugh at the desperation of someone who has realized that they've tried to pick on the wrong person in the wrong place. But I kept my tone serious, like any self-respecting sheriff. I said that I hoped I wouldn't see this kind of behavior again, and that she should use her position as HOA president to deal with something serious, like the weeds in Mr. Thompson's yard that looked like a jungle, and not to chase children on bicycles. She tried to justify herself, saying that she just wanted to maintain the standard of the neighborhood, that the rules existed for a reason. I stopped her right there. I said that I respect rules, but I don't accept abuse disguised as zeal, and that the next time she wanted to be a sidewalk vigilante, she'd better think twice, because I was going to be watching. She turned around without saying goodbye, without answering, with her tail between her legs like a dog that's done something wrong and knows it's going to sleep outside. And look, if the street had a soundtrack, at that moment that video game defeat sound would have been playing. It was beautiful. My poor nephew was still quiet. He didn't understand what had happened, but little by little a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. I took him home, made him a hot chocolate, and told him that not every adult is worth listening to. Sometimes you just have to let the person shout until they get tired, or show them who really has the authority. But I should have known that woman wouldn't let it go, because people like her don't know how to lose. And worse, she has free time. A lot of free time. Enough time to plan a Mexican soap opera revenge. And that's exactly what she started to do. The piece lasted exactly 2.5 days. It was almost as if the universe had given me a respite, only to laugh at me later. Because this woman, instead of putting her arrogance in her pocket and getting on with her life, decided to do what any control-obsessed human being would do. She doubled down. And this time, the soap opera gained new characters. The committees. Suddenly, papers started appearing in the mailboxes of houses in the neighborhood with new rules, all carefully written with the HOA logo and a typeface that seemed to have been chosen by someone who takes Comic Sans seriously. Among the news was a proposal to implement an educational program of good practices for minors. The only thing missing was her drawing of my nephew on the cover. The woman wanted to create a manual of conduct for children. Yes, an official HOA guide on how a human being under the age of 12 should behave in the neighborhood. Among the topics were things like, limit the speed of bicycles to 8 kilometers per hour, avoid playing near the entrance to houses, don't talk to adults without prior permission. This was no longer control, it was an institutionalized outbreak. Not only that, but she started doing what I call aggressive patrolling. Every time my nephew went out on his bike, there she was, mowing the lawn, sweeping the sidewalk for the 3rd time in a day, planting an imaginary flower, any excuse to be there, watching. She wasn't talking to him anymore, but she was looking. That look that says, "I'm watching you," as if he were Al Capone on wheels. Even her dog got into the mood. A hysterical, hairy animal with a cookie name, like Snickerdoodle or Truffle, that barked as if it was being paid for barking. And of course, the dog was always loose when the kid passed by. A desperate attempt at an accident disguised as a dog walk. But no one was foolish there. The whole neighborhood had noticed her outburst. But since everyone is afraid of trouble, most people preferred to keep quiet. But not me, because as well as being a sheriff, I'm stubborn. And when someone starts messing with my family out of ego and boredom, then I go into Mission Impossible mode. I decided to document everything. I bought more cameras, positioned one of them specifically facing the street in front of her house. I monitored schedules, behavior, strange movements. I started building my own dossier. And look, what began as a silly little revenge escalated to levels that you just have to see to believe. In less than a week, the woman organized a special HOA meeting. She sent a printed invitation with a gold seal and everything. Who sends out a neighborhood meeting invitation with a gold seal, people? Only someone who takes their own importance more seriously than their own birthday. The meeting was scheduled for a Saturday at 8 in the morning, a hand-picked time to punish anyone who dared to sleep late. I, of course, attended. I went in uniform, not because I'm flippant, but because I thought it was educational. I wanted her to be a visual reminder that her power ends where mine begins. The meeting was held in the neighborhood community hall, the same one that the HOA only lets you use if you promise not to eat anything with food coloring or use tape on the wall. She opened the proceedings like a morning TV presenter, with that plastered-on smile and the forced voice of someone who has practiced in the mirror. The topic was safety and behavior in the neighborhood, but everyone there knew what she wanted: to confront me publicly. She spoke for 20 minutes, and when I say spoke, I'm being polite. It was a monologue full of insinuations about local authorities who confuse freedom with permissiveness, about absent fathers and uncles who don't educate their children, and about the urgent need for a firm stance. He didn't name names, of course, but even the potted plants knew who the target was. I waited for her to finish. I let her get drunk on her own voice, and only then did I ask for the floor. I stood up, looked at every person in the room, and spoke with the calm of someone who knows the game is already won. I said that I respect rules, that I understand the importance of keeping the neighborhood organized, but when these rules become an instrument of ego, control, and persecution, they are no longer useful. He added, "We're not here to monitor children as if they were criminals. They're just children, and if anyone here disagrees, maybe the problem isn't with the wheels on the bike, but with the head of the person doing the supervising." The room fell silent. The woman fidgeted in her chair as if she were sitting on nails. Some people smiled. Others lowered their eyes, embarrassed that they hadn't said anything before. And then, as if that wasn't enough, I finished by warning that any form of harassment or bullying against minors would be duly investigated, based on laws, not neighborhood rules. And then I saw the color disappear from her face for good. But that's the thing. When you live to control, you don't listen. They plot. And I knew that from then on, she was going to try something even dirtier, because people like that don't back down. They climb. And her next move was going to be personal. Very personal. After that meeting, I could have sworn that the story had reached its climax. You know that feeling that the last act is over, and now you just have to wait for the credits to roll? Yeah, I thought so too. But this woman didn't know when to stop. She was like a bad movie that insists on being continued, even after everyone has asked to cancel the franchise. And like any good soap opera antagonist, she decided to deliver the final blow. Only she missed her target badly. It all started with a notice from the HOA itself. An official envelope, stamp and all, which arrived in the mail as if it were an invitation to a court hearing. Inside was a ridiculous document. I was formally accused of publicly embarrassing an official representative of the HOA and threatening community order with retaliation disproportionate to the situation presented. Bottom line, I caused a stir, and she didn't like being put in her place. But what really got me was the second sheet, a warning. Yes, the HOA decided that I deserved an official warning, signed by itself, for inappropriate conduct in a collective space. The conduct? Saying that chasing children was ugly. That was so surreal that I reread it 3 times to see if it wasn't a joke. But it wasn't. She really thought she could discipline me as if I were a rowdy student in art class. Only, because she was obsessed, she decided to double down. She sent an email to the residents. Long, full of misused technical terms. In the email, she said that the neighborhood was going through a delicate moment and that it was time to reinforce the values of respect, obedience to norms, and reverence for leadership structures. Yes, reverence. She really wrote that. She wanted to be treated as if she were a holy figure, a pope from the mowed lawn. And that's when she decided to mess with my family. Really. Rumors started circulating that my house was a place of disorder. Some neighbors started receiving anonymous notes, insinuating that my nephew was disturbing, rude, and posed a risk to the harmony of the neighborhood. There was a neighbor who came to ask me, with that little way, if everything was okay at home, because people were saying some weird things around. Weird, my child. The woman was running a smear campaign worthy of a politician at the end of an election. I could have ignored it. I could have let it pass. But then she crossed a line. She went to my nephew's school. That's right. She showed up with that ridiculous blazer, a frozen smile, and a folder full of documents, asking for a chat with the coordinator. She claimed that, as president of the neighborhood association, she was concerned about the behavior of the child in question, and that it might be a good time to talk to the parents to ensure that certain behaviors were adjusted. When I heard that, I dropped what I was doing on the spot. I went straight to school. The coordinator, poor thing, already knew me, so she didn't understand a thing. And when I explained the situation, she looked at me wide-eyed and said she thought it was very strange, because the woman had presented herself with an authority she didn't have. She made it clear that she had no legitimacy to go there. And that's when I decided that it was time to put an end to this nonsense. I called the county's legal department. I explained everything, from the first fit of rage on the sidewalk to the school play. I sent all the recordings, emails, photos of the tickets, everything I had. And when I showed the HOA document trying to warn me for retaliation, the lawyer laughed. He laughed out loud. He said that if this went ahead, she could end up being charged with abuse of authority, defamation, and even harassment of minors. The next few days were strangely silent. She disappeared, literally. She wasn't seen sweeping a sidewalk, tending a plant, or peeking out from behind a curtain. No one knew if she was ill, traveling, or just hiding from the impending shame. But I knew what it was. She had been notified. The county legal department made a point of sending a formal notice, with all the legal terms possible, explaining that she had crossed legal boundaries and that any further action against my family would be treated as systematic harassment. And that's when the house fell down. For good. At the next HOA meeting, which was supposed to be another opera of community control, she appeared pale, mute, and only spoke to announce her temporary resignation for personal reasons. The crowd applauded, not for what she said, but for what she didn't say. She lost. She was defeated by her own excess. She collapsed on the throne she built herself with Xeroxes of misinterpreted rules and a thirst for control. Today, the neighborhood is quieter. My nephew rides his bike without having to look over his shoulder. The sidewalk? Still intact, as it always was. The hysterical dog? Silenced by new owners. The former president? Reclusive. She must be planning her return in some dark room full of sulfite paper and resentment. But if she ever returns, she'll find not only a sheriff, you'll find an entire neighborhood vaccinated against madness with a badge. What would you do if a crazy neighbor started chasing your son or nephew just because he put his tire on her sidewalk? Would you keep calm, or would you do much worse than I did? And if you liked this video, don't forget to leave a like.